Okay, and I'll go ahead and fire up mouse pose A as well. So you guys, again with mouse pose A, you're gonna, I do this so that you can see the mouse clicks where I'm clicking. It'll also show you if I'm triple clicking, double clicking, and keyboard commands that I use will be displayed as well. So, oh, but I do need to fire it up, don't I? There we go. Dr. Bateman, your visit today threw my schedule up.
Sorry.
That's all right.
And now you have an eraser.
Dude, I'm going to stash it because we had some stuff before and it turned up missing. Okay. All right. Give this a moment to fire up. And we might want to turn the lights down. Yeah, we'll go full lights down if you wouldn't mind. That'd be great. Okay. And since we still have a little light outside, hopefully it doesn't start putting you guys to sleep anytime soon. This is going to be fun tonight. I think we're going to do a lab assignment for tonight. Lab assignment is number 7. And what we have is a project where we're actually going to be doing the lab assignment together. Okay? Because this 3D perspective stuff can get kind of tricky. You're working with different planes, and there's a lot of different options, and we've got to switch back and forth between a couple of different tools. And so, and because it's perspective, it just makes the whole thing more complicated. So we're going to be working through the lab assignment together. And then what I want you guys to do is, with the time left over, after we've worked through the basic structure of the lab assignment, we're going to be basically drawing a candy store in 3D. I want you guys, I want you to colorize them, using gradients, using color fills, the stuff that we've been working on, or working with for the last few weeks. So, all right, to get started here, we have Adobe Illustrator in open, and I'm just going to open a standard print size document. I'm going to change the units to inches and switch over to a landscape orientation. One of the keyboard commands that comes in really handy, well, whenever you're in Illustrator, is the zoom out and the zoom in keyboard commands. I don't know if I've demonstrated these before, but the command minus key command will zoom your artwork out. And I'm demonstrating this because with perspective, stuff can get very big. That perspective grid can actually move off of your artboard considerably. And so you'll want to, when you're working on your artwork, you'll want to make those adjustments quickly. And it's helpful to know that keyboard shortcut. Command minus is to zoom out, and then command equals, it zooms in. Okay, so you can see those keyboard commands in action there. And then command 0, of course, will fit our artboard to the screen. Okay. So the perspective tool is found in the toolbar, and it kind of looks like a grid in perspective. You can see it here on the left side. Some of you I know have the 2-column tools panel. We can see where it's positioned there. Yeah, here we go. It's in the third group, bottom right-hand corner, if you've got that mode showing. But the perspective grid tool is what allows you to set up a grid, a perspective grid on your artwork, And so let's go ahead and click on that, and we should see our. Okay. Why is it not showing up for me? Okay, let me try again. Here we go. There we go. Okay. So now I have a perspective grid that shows up. So you see, we ended up with kind of what I was trying to demonstrate on the whiteboard. My artwork was not as precise as this, of course. And Illustrator is kind enough to give you this grid pattern that's already in perspective for you. And those are just visual guides. So when you start snapping artwork to that grid, it'll allow you to kind of see what angles. Now, I always feel like the density of the perspective grid is a little high high, and you can turn that density down simply by going to View, and then down near the bottom is Perspective Grid, and then Define Grid is the option that you want to click on, and that brings up all of the options that you have for the Perspective Grid. You can see here that by default, Illustrator always gives us a 2-point perspective grid. You can switch this over to 3-point. Let's go ahead and do that. Click on OK, and then you'll see now that we've got a line, let me scroll down, converging down at the bottom there, and you can see our cube is taking on a new form even in the grid there. But I'm going to go ahead and switch back to 2-point perspective, and I'm going to show you where the opacity of that, or the opacity controls for the perspective grid lies. And that's down here at the bottom. And I'm going to change this to 30%. And then you can just hit the return key for OK. And now the density of the colors of our grid are not as strong. So when we start to put artwork on the board, we'll be able to see our artwork a little bit better. Okay. Does everyone have a perspective grid on their artboard right now, centered on their artboard? Okay. Just want to make sure we're all on the same page. And there's a lot of different control points here, right? You can see on the left we have our left vanishing point here. On the right we have the right vanishing point, just like I had drawn on the board. And this point here actually controls the height of our perspective grid. And so you can click on that and modify the height of that if you needed to draw something that's a little bit, or that's not as tall. And to move the entire perspective grid around, there's let's see, the name of this again is, boy, there's so many elements to this. This is ground level here. That's what this line, sort of imaginary line here, you can kind of see it. You can see it better on the screen up there than you can on even my monitor. But this is called ground level. And to move the entire grid around, you can click on one of these points on the ground level line, and that allows you to move the grid to a desired position. Okay. Now you can only have one grid per document, so you know it's you know, you can't set up multiple grids. If you wanted to draw multiple objects in 3D, you would have to do those in a separate document. And also, I mentioned earlier when I was demonstrating on the board that you can move those vanishing points in or out, and by moving them in or out, it will give you either more acute angles or, of course, shallower angles. So the default looks pretty good, but if I move this left vanishing point in, you can see how it really starts to distort or you know, just make this side of the building much more acute, and gives the artwork will give the artwork a different perspective. That's what this is all about. So I'm going to stick with the standard setup just to keep things kind of easy. And if you notice, we have up here in the left-hand corner, this is called our plane widget right here. This is an important little tool. Okay. What this indicates is it tells you which of these planes is active. Okay. So if you look, this top left grid in my plane widget is active. It's blue. So that means anything that I draw is going to snap to the perspective of the plane on the left-hand side of my grid. Okay? And if I switch over to right, anything I draw will snap to the right side. If I switch to the bottom, anything I draw will snap to this. You can kind of see the grid that's at the base down there. And also, if you click outside of that cube, not, you know, you don't want to click out here, but just outside of the cube, if you can see where my mouse is showing up on screen, if you click on that, it deselects the perspective grid, and now you would draw as normal. Your objects would just draw like they always do in Illustrator, just flat two-dimensional objects. Okay, enough talk. Let me show you how that works. I'm going to start, of course, you guys know I love rectangles, right? So I'm going to start with a rectangle. Now, I don't have any grid plane active, so when I draw a square here with my rectangle, it's not going to be in perspective. It's just going to work the way Illustrator traditionally works when you're not in perspective grid mode. Okay. Any questions on that? So I've been moving at a quick pace here. Any questions on this so far? Does everyone kind of have the tool up, the perspective grid on screen? Okay. Now, this time I'm going to click on the left grid, and you guys can follow right along, of course. And notice that my cursor has changed. It has an arrow. You can always look at your cursor, and it'll tell you which side of your grid is going to have artwork applied to it. And this is going to be the left side. The arrow is pointing left. So now, if I decide to draw a rectangle again, it won't render the way it does normally in two-dimensional mode. Now it actually renders in 3D along this plane, the left plane here. So all of these lines are converging on the left vanishing point. Now, moving that object around, right, is tricky. You don't want to use your selection tool when you're moving a 3D object around. If you go back to your selection tool and try to move something that you've created in 3D, look at that. It's no longer bound to the rules of that perspective grid. It has been isolated as a shape in Illustrator that does not belong to the perspective grid anymore. Does that make sense? So you don't want to use that if you need to move your artwork around. There is, hidden underneath the perspective grid tool, the perspective selection tool. So that is where you want to move, the tool you want to select if you want to move your artwork and still have it remain in perspective mode. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and select. Yeah, Christian.
Is there a keyboard shortcut for that?
There is. There are. Yeah, good question.
Okay.
They're right here. Shift P, right, gives you the perspective grid tool, and then Shift V gives you the selection tool. Good question.
Thanks.
Yeah, and there are. I'll talk a little more about shortcuts in a moment for the plane, for the planes as well. So now that I have the perspective selection tool active, now when I go to move this object, you'll see it continues to move in perspective. It doesn't. It remains in that mode. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? Because we're going to be drawing some artwork here in a bit, and this is going to be something that you're going to want to do. You're going to use frequently to adjust your artwork. Yeah, Craig.
Is there a way to make the object kind of like wrap around the corner of it, so you're not on one or the other? Can you like?
Unfortunately, not. There are some of the rules of general perspective apply to this too, and Illustrator does have some 3D modeling capabilities, but not in this perspective grid mode. You can, if, and by the way, this isn't going to be a reading assignment lesson, but I encourage you to review lesson 9 in the classroom in the book, because Craig, what you were asking about wrapping stuff, there's a demo there where you can actually split the planes apart and draw artwork between the two planes. It wouldn't quite be a wrap, but it is one way that you can add a dimension. And lesson 9 demonstrates that. If you want to learn more about the perspective tool. So now, resizing this is done, of course, by grabbing the corners as you would with your regular bounding box, right? You have to have your bounding box active, though. If you're not able to, I'm going to Command Shift B, that's the keyboard shortcut for bounding box. If you're not able to scale that, it's probably because your bounding box is not active while you're working on this artwork, okay? So So you want to make sure that your bounding box is active. To do that, again, the keyboard command is Command-Shift-B, and it's also available under View, and then you toggle whether you want to show or hide the bounding box, okay? And so those are the basics on getting started in perspective. Okay, so I'm going to try to replicate one of these cubes that I was doing earlier on the whiteboard, but using Adobe Illustrator. Okay, I have my bounding box selected, so I can move this shape into position, and I'm going to, it's a little rectangular, so I'm going to try to square it up a little bit here, just visually, and you can count. That's what's really helpful about the grid, is you can count how many grid spaces you have, horizontally and vertically, and that will let you know whether your object is indeed square. And I'm going to draw a second rectangle on the opposite side to complete that shape. But this time I need to click on the right grid panel in the plane widget. Okay. Notice there's a little number 3 next to right grid. Right here, you guys see that little 3 up there? That's the keyboard shortcut for switching over to the right plane grid. Okay. So hitting 3 switches over to that. Hitting 2 switches to the bottom. Hitting 1 switches to the left, and hitting the 4 key switches to normal drawing mode. You're not drawing it. If you switch over to you notice the ring outside of my cube has now been highlighted, and so if I were to start drawing now, it would draw in standard 2D mode. Okay? Any questions on that so far? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to that right plane. On my using my my widget here, I just hit the number 3 key, and I'm going to start drawing the other side of that cube. And I see some of you guys are already doing this. You're getting the hang of it. And so now I've got both sides of my cube. Now I want to put a top on this. Well, the top, you use the horizontal grid to put both the top and the bottom on a cube like this. So I'm going to click on that, and now when I go to draw my finishing piece, I'm starting from one corner to the other corner. You see my it shows that I've locked onto that corner by indicating that with the small word anchor that appears on the screen. And now I've basically drawn a cube in 3D using the grid tool. Now, you might want to hide your grid while you're working, right? Because if your artwork's very complicated and you're working on details, this grid and all of these lines can get in the way. So to turn off the grid temporarily, you can simply hit this little X here in the top left corner of your plane widget. Okay, so you hit that. Well, it's supposed to. That's what that little X is for. I don't know why it's not working. Probably, I know why, because I'm not on the perspective grid tool. I had switched over to the selection tool for some reason. But now that I'm back on the perspective grid tool, I can click in the top left corner, and you see indeed now the cursor indicates that it's ready to hide the grid, and my artwork has, or the grid has been hidden from view. Well, now you want to bring it back, right? Because you want to continue your design. Of course, you can hit the selection tool and then go back to the perspective grid tool. That's one way of bringing it up. Okay. The other method is to go View in the menu bar, scroll down to Perspective Grid, and here again you can toggle whether to show the grid or not. And there is a keyboard shortcut for it. Command-Shift-I toggles that. Okay? So I'll go ahead and show the grid so you can kind of see what's going on. And now that we have these objects, you can color them like any other vector object, the way we've been doing our projects. Yeah, you've got a good looking cube there, Cynthia. That looks great. I like the angle on that. So to colorize, what we can do is using the perspective selection tool, you can select a plane. Thank you. And simply by clicking on an object, and then now you can use your swatches, you can use your gradients, you can add strokes. I'm just going to apply a color here, and you see it filled with that light brown. I'm going to click on the other side, and I'm going to fill it with a slightly darker brown, so it looks like it's, you know, there's light coming in from one side, which means the top would probably be the lightest of all. And now I've got something like this. I'll go ahead and hide the grid just to show what I have going on here. Boy, it's hard to click on that little guy sometimes. There we go. So now I've got this cube in 3D. Adding gradients to this instead of solid fill colors will even enhance the artwork more, right? Start to create more realistic designs for your project. Okay? In a nutshell, that is the perspective. That's a real basic intro to the perspective tool. Any questions on that? Anyone think it's cool? Awesome. Yes, Megan.
How did you get the top on the box again?
So the top on the box, I had to switch over. Let me bring my my grid back up. I had to use the horizontal grid to get that, right? Which is this bottom, you know, you can hit the number 2 key when you're in the perspective grid tool mode. You hit number 2 and it switches over to the horizontal grid. Now, any shape that you draw will conform to that plane that is relative to, you know, the top or the bottom of that box. Okay, and earlier I'd drawn this. I'm going to go move it out of the way. Let me jump into that real quick here. Let me move that original one out of the way. Let's move it out. Oh boy, there we go. That's fine. It's moving towards us. And I'm going to click back on my rectangle tool and simply draw from one corner to the other, making sure that I see that word anchor appear so that it indeed snaps into position. Did that help at all? Yeah, and you can move it still too. It looks like you might be, if you use the are you using the perspective selection tool to move it? Okay. Basically, what it looks like it's doing is it's kind of moving it in one direction or the other. Let's see how to fix that. I know there's a method to the madness. Okay, so what I ended up doing there, which was not the desired result, is I ended up moving my artwork using the standard selection tool, and what that did is now it's no longer into that perspective. But back to your question, are you still having a challenge drawing that top to the box? It's just not snapping. I would try redrawing it, because you may have moved, if you move it using the selection tool, as opposed to even just a bit, it disconnects it from perspective mode completely. Oh, some of you guys have that Cubert look going. Right, that multicolored cubes. Cool. All right, so let's see. Well, this is the really cool thing. I don't use the perspective grid tool very often, but there is one thing that I think is really neat about it, and we'll be doing some of this today. Remember earlier I drew this rectangle, and you guys feel free to draw a rectangle outside of perspective grid mode, of course by hitting the outside edge of the widget or the number 4 key. And go ahead and draw a rectangle or any object, okay? Has everyone had a chance to do that? Does everyone have some sort of rectangle?
You don't want it to be a perspective?
We don't want it to be perspective. This is just drawing a rectangle in standard 2D mode. Does everyone have a rectangle you can work with. And you see, you try to move it around, you try to get it back into perspective, and you just can't do it. Yes, Alicia. You have to be on your perspective grid tool. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. You have to be on the grid tool, I think. Okay. All right. So does everyone have a rectangle like that? Here's the cool thing. You can draw on your artboard, on another artboard in your document, right? You can draw outside of your artboard artwork that you want to put into this 3D world. And you can draw it flat and have Illustrator convert it into 3D and put it into your drawing. So let me go ahead and do a, actually I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to change the shape of this guy. I'm going to make a sign for my, I'm going to fill it with a nice pink. And I'm going to use the type tool to type in building. Nothing exciting. I'm not very original sometimes. I'm going to center this text by hitting Command-Shift-C for centering. So now the text is centered. And I'm going to make it a little bit bigger by changing the font size. Let's see here. Boy, my computer's moving a little slow. There we go. Let me go ahead and change it to, let's see if double. That looks pretty good. All right, nothing exciting. I'm going to make the text white too, so it just stands out a little bit. I made this pink so that it was obvious. Okay, so now I've created this artwork in 2D mode. You could be anything. You could be rendering, you could be drawing something that's pretty complex. In this case, of course, it's relatively basic. We've got a rectangle and some text on top. Now, I selected both of those things. Of course, you can either drag your mouse across with the selection tool to select them both, or you can shift click, whatever it takes, but you want both of your items selected. Okay? Now, switch over to your perspective selection tool with your object selected. Okay? I'm going to do that now. And while holding the number 5 key down, there we go. Let me click and drag that object towards your artwork.
You're supposed to have it on the bottom one?
No, that's why it's doing that. Sorry. This Illustrator's a lot smarter than I am. I was trying to put the sign on the left-hand side. I need to be on the left grid to do that. Okay? And so now, if you, I don't have them selected anymore. There we go. Now they're both selected. Now, if I click and drag while holding the 5 key down, notice my artwork gets instantly moved into that 3D world. Okay, I'm going to move it to the foreground too. I'll zoom in a bit. Now, a couple of things happened here. First, my type became outlined. So keep that in mind. Whenever you're working with type, or if you intend to work with type and intend to be in 3D and use it in 3D mode, as soon as you convert it to the perspective grid mode, it's going to be outlined. So you won't be able to edit that text anymore or change the word or whatever. Okay? But let's see, we'll paste it right in front of that. There we go. Now we've got it. So now we've got the building sign on the face of the artwork there. So that's just a quick overview of this perspective tool. What I want to do next is actually jump into the lab project. Okay? And but before we do that, why don't we take a quick break? We'll do an early break today, and then we'll jump back into this, and then that way you guys can have enough time to get through the lab assignment and get it turned in, because it'll be, we do at the end of the class. So, any questions on that stuff? You guys learned something new? Seem pretty cool? Yeah. All right. Good. All right. So why don't we come back at let's do well, I hate doing those 7-minute breaks. Doesn't seem like enough sometimes. Come back in 10 minutes. It'll be fine.
Is there a quiz at the beginning?
Go ahead and start this back up. Okay, so we've gone in and turned our drawing layer into a template layer by double-clicking and selecting template in its options. And we'll go ahead and close our layers panel. Okay, then we'll switch over to our perspective grid and get that grid on the screen. And of course, by default, it drops right into the center of our artboard. Yes?
Did we create a new layer?
You're one step ahead of me, aren't you? Yes. According to the lab assignment that you have in front of you, you want to create a new layer. This is where we're going to be working. And that new layer is going to be called, what is it? Candy Store. All right, there we are. Thank you, Alicia. So now you see we have both layers there, and this is the one we're going to be working in. Yeah, if we didn't have a layer active, we wouldn't be able to draw anything because that template layer is locked. Now I can close my layers panel, and you'll see that my perspective grid doesn't really line up to my building. It's not in the right perspective, basically. I drew it one way, I sketched it out in my mind in one way, but now, the default perspective grid is not conforming to that. But of course, as we learned a little bit earlier, you can change some of these parameters. And the way I like to start is I'm going to zoom out first so I can see, again, this is where that keyboard command, command minus is really useful. And I'm going to move this perspective grid to where, let me show you where. It's hard to see with this dim. But I'm going to try to position it right over here on the corner of my building so that the two corners are in the same place. And I do that by grabbing the ground plane adjustment tool. So now I've started there. Now at least, and if you look here, I'm going to zoom back in. It's pretty close. It could probably move a little bit. No, I'm not going to worry about it. Again, my sketch wasn't to perspective, right? It was just an approximation. But you can see that my horizon line is in the wrong place too, because of the way this bottom is not aligned at all. And so to move the horizon line, we grab the horizon line on the left edge and move that down until I'm using, and by the way, I'm using this line here. You can kind of see that, barely see it through there. I'm using this line, and I'm aligning the orange line up to that line. Does that make sense? No, it's tricky stuff. I want to make sure everyone's here, though. Anyone not able to do that quite yet? So what I did is, let me back up out of there. This is where I started, right, Brianna? And you can see that the bottom edge of my perspective line here that's going to this right vanishing point does not conform to the same angle that I have here in my drawing. So I'm going to move this vanishing point down to get this line and this line to be at the same angle. All right? So I'm going to do that here. Sorry, you don't do it with the vanishing point. That moves the vanishing point in and out. You actually do it with the horizon line adjustment button, and that's what allows you to move that. And this is, again, an approximation. I know I'm not right on. I can move it around a little bit if I feel like I need to just tweak it a bit. No, it's a little too far right. I think I had it in the right spot before, but there we are. Okay. Well, now we have another problem, right? Same thing is happening here. You can see that the top edge of my building, this angle is too acute. It's almost like a fisheye lens, right? Whereas my drawing, this slope of the top of the building is a lot shallower. So to make that adjustment, you can just grab the top of your perspective grid and slide that down to where it's in line with the top of the building. Now, but you notice it squished everything down. At least it did on mine. Maybe some of you have made that adjustment. Well, that needs to be adjusted by moving this vanishing point out even further. I probably should have done this first. Look at that. It's really stretching it out. And this is where zooming out is really helpful. I'm also using the keyboard shortcut. Who remembers how to bring the hand up? Look, spacebar brings that hand up. That's a really quick way to look at that. If I hit the spacebar, it brings my hand up, and now I can just grab my document and move it all around wherever I like. So I've got to keep sliding that over. I'm going to keep pulling my vanishing point out farther and farther and farther until I feel it's at the angle, right on the angle with the top of edge of my building. And so now you see I've got this plane. I'm just working on the right plane right now. I've got this plane pretty dialed. You can see the top edge.
But the bottom line doesn't line up anymore.
It should have stayed pretty. And again, no, you're right. My drawing, basically my drawing was not very accurate. My drawing wasn't in perspective, is what it is, right?
Okay.
My drawing had this funky perspective that wasn't quite right. And you can keep making these adjustments. So part of that, too, Craig, with what you just mentioned, is my horizon line isn't in the right spot. Looks like I need to move it back up, right, and try to get that line back to the correct spot. I'm tweaking everything here. My horizon lines come back up. I'm going to readjust my right vanishing point. It's worth doing this because I kind of like my original drawing, so I'm trying to get as close as possible to it. So I made another adjustment. I moved my horizon line up. So basically my eyes went up the building now a little bit. And now it's starting to get there. How am I doing? Is that better? That bottom line looks pretty good. I'll live with that little gap. And this one looks pretty good. I'll live with that. Does everyone kind of have something similar to that? I want to make sure everyone catches up so we're all working in that same, we're ending up with similar results and understanding the process. I'm going to hit Command 0 to fit my artboard to the window. And notice what I did here. Boy, I was really tweaky with this candy store. The left side of my building is super acute compared to what the default is. But now that I already have my horizon line established, I'm just going to slide my vanishing point in on the right to force. Oh boy, it's really acute. Look at that. I was way off with my drawing too. Oh well. But that's why we're doing this in Illustrator. You can see that my drawing was not very accurate. This perspective grid is telling me so. The bottom, and this is where I was saying right earlier, when you hand draw perspective, you can kind of get there, but to the eye, you can tell that it's not exactly right. Well, with this perspective tool, it will be spot on. Okay. Everyone caught up to that? Anyone not there? Everyone not have their perspective grid in the right position? Cynthia, Alexis, you guys are still working on it? So try moving the horizon line up. Right about there. Now drag your vanishing point and move way out. Keep going. Don't worry about this break. There you go. Right there.
Let's do this. It affects it more when you select one of these.
So to do
That's
that,
just my thing.
that's
Like,
fine.
I feel like it's
You can slide your whole. Remember how to move your whole perspective grid over? You have to do it using the control bar. Zoom out a little bit, and then grab this guy, and just move the whole thing over to the left. Right there. Perfect. Got it. And you notice this angle here's a little off, so you just slide that vanishing point in. And it's not going to be exact because my drawing's not exact, but we want to get pretty close. You got it, Cynthia? Alexis, looking up? Yeah, that looks good. Yeah. And again, this is the drawing is just a kind of a guide. This isn't going to be extremely precise at this stage. Oh, not at all. Boy, my drawing was way off. Okay. All right, so now we've got our grid set up to pretty much replicate what I sketched out, which I kind of like, so that's why I'm going through this process of getting my perspective grid in the correct position. Okay. The best way to work when you're drawing in Illustrator, right, is from the farthest thing back forward. And that's because Illustrator kind of works in that model. Remember, anything you draw stacks on top of what was there previously. So if you look at this drawing, you can kind of see, well, basically, the walls of the building are what are the farthest thing back. They should be at the bottom. So that's what we're going to start with. I wouldn't start with the candy shop sign, or the windows, because I have to get a wall behind those. So I'm going to start from the back, moving forward. And I'm going to start on the right side because I like this big wall here. I'm going to make sure that my artwork is set to a no fill. I'm going to change that to none on the fill. And a black stroke, I want my black stroke to be, I'd say, let's go with 5 points so that we can really kind of see it as we draw. Okay? So now that I know I'm going to be drawing the right object because it's going to not have a fill, so I can continue to see my sketch. I'm going to start drawing. I'm going to switch over here to my rectangle tool, and I'm going to make that first side of the building. And as I draw, obviously the shape's conforming to my grid, and I've created that first wall of my building. Okay, now, some of you, if you tried drawing this and you weren't on the right plane, I forgot to mention that, if you tried drawing this side, but you were on the left plane, it's not going to be correct. So make sure you're drawing that side of the wall on the correct plane. Okay, does everyone have that? All right. Now I'm going to switch over to the left grid using the widget, and I'm going to draw the other side of the building there. And everything should be snapping into place. Okay, cool. Now I've got something going on here. It's starting to look like something. The next thing I'm going to do, because it's not in the way, I'm going to go ahead and draw this. You notice how I have this little bit of a beveled edge to, or sort of a ledge to the top of the building here. You see that line? I just turned off my perspective grid temporarily. I'm going to draw that next, and I'm going to do that simply by drawing a line. Okay? Or actually, I'm not going to draw a line. That's one way to do it. I forgot to mention earlier that there are several tools that work in perspective. Under the line segment area, all of these tools, the line segment tool, the arc tool, spiral tool, I know we haven't gotten into, maybe some of you guys have gotten into these with some of your design projects, but we haven't spent a lot of time with these. But these are different drawing tools that you have. All of these will work in perspective, as will all of the shape tools except for the flare tool. A flare will not render in the perspective grid plane. Okay, but the others will. Stars, polygons, ellipse, those will all render in the 3D plane. But right now we're just using rectangle. And instead of using a line to create that little ledge, I'm actually going to use another rectangle. And the reason for that is, in your designs later on, you might want to make that ledge a slightly different color, right? Because it could be painted red. Maybe you want to fill it with some gradients that look like candy canes or something. It's a candy store after all. So I'm on the left grid here, so I'm going to continue with that, and I'm going to draw that little ledge, just letting it snap, letting those corner points snap. Switch over to the right grid, and I'm going to draw the right side here, and that's starting to look close. Whoops, I got a little out there. I'm going to readjust that just a bit. I'm going to bring that back in using my perspective selection tool and grab the corner. There we go. That's where I want it. Okay. So I moved it after the fact. When I first drew it, it wasn't in the right spot, and I'm going to zoom in. And so I used the perspective selection tool to get to the right spot. Let me see if I can. I'm on. There we go. There we go. So now you can see I'm right on top of that. We're looking pretty good here. Okay? Command 0 will get me back to fit my artwork. Any questions so far? Is everyone at the same spot? Some of you guys I see are moving ahead. You have it down.
Question.
Yes.
How do you make sure that's, because it's hard to see, just the those lines?
Well, one quick way to do it is you can always, this is you can zoom in and do something else, because if your line's too thick, you may not still be able to tell. If you switch over, by the way, great question, because this is one of those things that is good to get in the habit of doing a lot, and that is switching over into outline view. If you switch over into outline view, now you're just going to get real thin lines representing your art, and you can zoom in and you can see I'm smack dab right on top of it. Okay, and it's hard to see that if your stroke is too thick and you're trying to zoom in. So good question there. Okay. All right. The next few steps are pretty straightforward. I am going to draw the window. I'm not going to do the sign yet. And the reason for that, you can if you'd like, because some of you guys kind of got the gist of this. The reason for that is I want to demonstrate that moving from 2D to 3D mode that we did earlier. Remember when we did the click and drag of the holding the number 5 key. Okay. So now we have a window that actually has a frame around it. If you had looked at it in the drawing, it's hard to see now that it's all faded out. There's actually a frame. So I'm going to do 2 of these personally. And again, this design is going to be yours, so you'll want to do this design however you want to render the final. But I'm going to zoom in here and adjust the top edge, dragging that down just so that I have about the same amount of space, all the way around, so I have a frame. It's a little thick right now. Obviously, it's not going to be that thick later on, but that's what I have right now. Now, this doorway is really tricky, you guys. This is kind of saving this for last, because that's going to get tricky. I'm going to create my other window, the window on the other side, while I'm in this mode of drawing these relatively simple shapes. And I actually want them to align, because if I was a general contractor, I wouldn't want one of these windows higher than the other. So I'm going to get those to align by getting those. You can see here, I'm actually visually looking at this grid plane here. You see this, you guys? I'm looking at this grid plane on the horizon level, on the horizontal level, and I'm making sure that my window is aligned across with the other window. Command Shift V. That's not what I meant to do. There we go. I'll move it up just a smidge. All right, there we go. Now those 2 windows are aligned, and I can draw my other frame inside of that second window. And again, you guys don't have to do frames. You might want to decorate your window slightly different when you start getting into the design. But I'm doing it this way just to show you kind of a meticulous process. You really have to zoom in far to get some granular control over the positioning of this second frame. And you can see, oh boy, it's snapping to grid. And you can turn that off. Excuse me. But this is going to look a lot better when, of course, we don't have these really thick lines going across. Okay. We'll work with that for now so we can keep moving on. And then we have a window on the left-hand side that's not quite the same as the others. Oops. There, I made that mistake. You guys see what I started to do? I got a little eager. I started to draw that window before I switched over to the left grid. So I switch over to the left grid now. Now I can draw that window in perspective, and you'll see we have this going on. Okay. The way to do both candy shop signs, we can practice this model of moving from 2D to 3D. So I'm going to work on this left-hand sign first, okay? And basically, I'm going to click on the, or hit the number 4 key, either one, but you can click on the no active grid area of your widget, and now you can draw a sign. You can do a vertical one like I did if you'd like, but basically I'm going to attach it to the side and the back of the building there. That's my goal. And then to get the type to stack vertically like that, Some of you might be familiar with this, but if you look under the type tool, there's additional type tools that allow you to set type in different ways. And conveniently, Illustrator has a vertical type tool, and that's what you can select. Again, it's under the type tool, vertical type tool. Now, when you click and start typing, I'm just going to type candy, you'll see that Illustrator types in stacking letters. Now, right now, I want you guys to be mindful of what font you use. So take a moment, if you're at the same stage of doing the candy sign, take a moment to figure out what font you want to use for this. After all, it's a candy store. You might want to consider, Comic Sans. Actually, no, don't consider that. That's an insult, right, to the great typographer. This Nueva, might be kind of nice. Oh boy, what's going on here? Oh, that's why. There's a little flyout window so that I can select which version of Nueva. That's kind of cute. Okay, we can stick with that. And I'm going to position that over my sign, make it a little bit bigger. And now I kind of have a candy store looking sign. Okay, and then I did include the word shop down here inside of my sign. We can do that with our artwork as well. I'm going to make it slightly bigger, and I'm going to switch back over to my type tool. And in really small letters, let's see, shop. There we go. I'm going to type horizontally the word shop and move it into position down here. All right. Everyone got that so far? We kind of have a candy store. Yes, Megan.
How do you see the font, like the preview of the fonts again?
You have to open the character panel. So you should have, when you're on your type tool, the option to open a character panel here, and it should be the word character. If you click on that and then select the font drop down, that gives you the font preview. Okay? All right. Any other questions? You stuck a little bit, Alicia?
You just typed another, you basically used just another.
Yeah, but I switched back over to the horizontal type, to the standard type tool. Yep. That's all. And again, you guys, afterwards you'll have hopefully some time to finesse this up a bit and add some dimension. I see some of you guys are already getting the detail in the windows and everything else. So now for the door. Let's go ahead and move on to the door. I think the rest of it, you now have enough information to finish up, for instance, the window panes on the side there, and so on and so forth. So let's jump over to this door here. There's a lot of things going on. This door is inset, right? So we have one element here that is on the left grid plane. The door itself is on the right grid plane. So those are actually in two different planes, but it's kind of visually the same object. So the first thing I'm going to do is draw the door because it's the farthest thing back, okay? So while I'm in perspective mode, I'm going to switch over to the doors again on the right plane. I can see that because here's my right plane. The door is following that same right plane. So I'm going to switch over to the right plane by hitting, well, you have to be on the tool, but if I hit the 3 key when I'm on the perspective tool, it quickly jumps over to the right plane. Now I can draw a door by simply dragging the shape there. Now, let me switch those because at some point in time, because of my type, because my type was filled black. So that's a door, right? Now I'm going to draw the door frame, which is basically the same angle as the door but bigger. It's going to take up all of this space here. Actually, before I do that, I should draw this side of the entryway here. To do that, I'm going to. Oh, any questions? You have questions there? I'm going to switch back over to the left grid and draw the the entry there. And now I should have that going on there. Now, switching back over to the right grid, I'm going to draw the exterior doorway. And I'm having you do the exterior doorway so that you can play around with all of these different shapes in your own design to apply